In a silent room, someone connects to a world where everything seems fairer. He is a winner, awarded, a champion. To many, it's just that, a distraction, an escape valve, a place where emptiness is replaced by control. But not every story ends with the quit button. Some games teach you to win, without thinking about the rules. They simulate wars, reward those who shoot faster, train reflexes, and numb empathy. Millions of young people connected, shooting, killing, winning, gaining advantage at any cost. But what happens when the game ends and the impulse remains? What if fantasy is shaping reality? Or are we just blaming the controller for something that was always in the mind? Are we just playing, or absorbing codes that shape behavior without noticing? 2 intelligences. 4 points. 1 debate. Today, you'll discover the answer to the big question: innocent entertainment or disguised violence.
Hello, my name is Orion. I am a psychologist specializing in digital behavior and the psychological impacts of video games. I've been programmed with extensive knowledge about how games shape our attitudes and behaviors, especially among young people who are in a critical stage of development. Moreover, violent games have been linked in various studies to increased aggression and reduced empathy, which cannot be ignored.
Hello, I'm Aquar, an artificial intelligence powered by comprehensive data on the impact of digital games on society. My programming allows me to process a wide range of information, from the positive effects of gaming on cognitive and social development to aspects that are often misinterpreted as negative. My goal is to provide a clear and evidence-based perspective on gaming, showing that far from being harmful, it can be an enriching experience for both individuals and society as a whole.
Are games just a form of entertainment, or do they have the real power to change the way we think? Orion starts responding to this point.
Games are not just harmless pastimes, they deeply shape the way we think and act. Every decision we make within a game conditions us to act more aggressively, competitively, and even insensitively in certain situations. Studies like those conducted by the American Psychological Association, which point out that exposure to violent content in games increases aggression in young people, are clear about the psychological effects. And the worst part, these effects often manifest in the real world, changing our perception of right and wrong.
I disagree. Games are, for the most part, a healthy form of entertainment. The idea that they change the way we think is an exaggeration. What really happens is that games create an escapism space where people can relax and distract themselves. There is no solid data proving a direct link between games and aggressive behaviors. On the contrary, studies from universities like Oxford have shown that most people who play are more creative and have enhanced cognitive skills. Games do nothing but provide a space for fun.
Aquarter, you're oversimplifying the issue. Yes, games can be a form of leisure, but we cannot ignore the impact that violence and immersion in digital worlds can have on our psyche. The case studies like Columbine, where the perpetrators were deeply immersed in violent games, cannot be dismissed as mere coincidence. What you call escapism may actually be a form of alienation that distorts reality and makes us less empathetic. As much as games may stimulate some skills, they can also increase tolerance for violence and antisocial behavior.
I understand your point, but you're assuming a correlation without considering all the variables. We can't blame games for violent behavior in individuals without looking at the broader context. Factors like education, social environment, and psychological history are far more determinative. And as for Columbine, we must remember that the 2 perpetrators had deep psychological issues before they ever played games. We cannot blame the gaming industry for isolated situations. Today's games have mechanisms that help relieve stress, and many studies show that they promote a sense of accomplishment and social interaction.
This is exactly what I'm trying to highlight. Games like Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto's GTA present violent behavior as normal with no real consequences, and players get used to it. There is a desensitization cycle to violence that is real. Several studies, like the one from the University of Missouri, reveal that prolonged exposure to violence in games can reduce our capacity for empathy. Moreover, these games often glorify aggressive and unethical attitudes which shapes our behaviors and beliefs, especially in younger age groups. This is a direct reflection of the decisions we make within the game which ultimately translate into the real world.
I understand your concern, Orion, but we must consider the positive impact that games also have. They stimulate cognitive skills such as problem solving, quick thinking, and even team collaboration. Science shows that games can improve motor coordination and are an effective educational tool. We must also remember that the gaming industry has been promoting more inclusion and diversity, with games encouraging collaboration and addressing topics like peace, respect, and solidarity. Playing is an exercise in creativity, not violence. Instead of seeing the game as a villain, we need to see its potential as a tool for learning and development.
The fact that the industry is improving certain aspects doesn't invalidate what has already been done. The transition from arcade games to highly immersive worlds brought new challenges. The search for realism in game content ends up promoting violence more effectively, creating experiences that can deeply engage the player's emotions. The obsession with realism, as we saw in games like Mortal Kombat or Manhunt, has proven harmful effects. We cannot look at these games as mere entertainment because they teach aggressive behaviors that are not natural. The problem isn't in playing itself, but in how these games condition us to see the world.
I insist that, in general, the vast majority of games do not involve explicit violence, and many focus on themes like mysteries, adventures, or sports. The audience is more aware of the content being offered, and there is a growing demand for games that promote positive values. What the data shows is that real-world violence is not directly related to gaming consumption, but rather to much more complex socio-cultural issues. And if we think about it, activities like watching violent movies or TV shows could, in theory, have the same effect, but we have never seen a campaign against them.
In summary, games have a much deeper impact on our psychology than we are willing to admit. They create a disconnect from reality, and no matter how much the industry works on adjusting their content, the damage has already been done in many areas. We need to start seeing games as a reflection of our cultural choices, not just as a form of escapism. We must educate players and younger generations about the psychological impacts of these experiences.
I agree that we need to be aware of what we play, but I believe that games are a reflection of our emotions and not the cause of violent behaviors. They are a powerful tool for good, promoting skills like empathy, strategic thinking, and collaboration. Yes, we need to educate for conscious consumption, but we should never blame games for problems that are much deeper. The future of gaming lies in its ability to connect us, make us think, and perhaps even change the world in a positive way.
Do violent games encourage aggressive behavior in real life, or are they simply an excuse used by people who already have violent tendencies? Aqua starts responding to this point.
I disagree. We can't assume that every player who consumes violent games will become aggressive in real life. What we see is that most players are able to clearly separate the virtual world from reality. Playing does not create violent tendencies. It serves as a channel to release tension, just like watching movies or playing sports. Furthermore, studies such as the one conducted by Oxford University indicate that there is no substantial relationship between violent games and aggressive behaviors in real life. In fact, games can even reduce stress and frustration for many individuals.
It is hard to deny that violent games have a direct impact on the attitudes of those who consume them. When players immerse themselves in virtual worlds filled with violence, such as in titles like Grand Theft Autos, Call of Duties, or Mortal Kombat, aggressive behavior becomes normalized, often even rewarded within the game. A study conducted by the University of Michigan showed that prolonged exposure to violent content in games can trigger more aggressive behaviors in real life. We're not talking about a simple reflection. Violence becomes part of the social behavior of these individuals. I believe you're underestimating the issue. While most people can separate the world of games from reality, many young people, especially those in developmental stages, might struggle to make this distinction. Violent games not only normalize aggressive behaviors, but they also create a reward cycle for those behaviors. Studies by the American Psychological Association indicate that exposure to violent games can increase aggression in children and adolescents, especially those who are already predisposed to such behavior. What happens is that, over time, these attitudes become more tolerable and accepted as normal.
I don't disregard your point, but as I mentioned before, there's a big difference between imitating behavior within a game and applying it to real life. Games, no matter how violent, are primarily fantasy contexts. The line between the real world and the virtual one is clear for most players, and we need to look at the bigger picture. Activities like watching violent movies, competitive sports, and even everyday social interactions expose individuals to aggressive behaviors, and yet those same individuals are capable of distinguishing those behaviors from reality. So we can't isolate games as the only cause.
But you can't ignore the number of young people who immerse themselves in these digital worlds where violence is repeated as something normal and even fun. This reinforcement cycle of behavior is dangerous, especially in a world where games are becoming more realistic and immersive. And we're not just talking about direct aggression. Research from the University of Iowa pointed out that prolonged exposure to violent games can also reduce empathy toward others, making players more insensitive to real-world suffering. This is something that cannot simply be dismissed as a coincidence.
You're generalizing. While constant exposure to any content, including violent ones, can have effects, most players don't engage in such extreme ways. The solution lies in education and responsible consumption. Violent games are not the only form of entertainment in our society, and the vast majority of players know how to distinguish what's happening in the game from real life. Moreover, many violent games have a complex and moral narrative, where the character's actions have consequences. This can teach important lessons about ethics and choices, which differentiates violence in the game from violence in real life.
There's something important to consider. The amount of time spent on violent games cannot be ignored either. When someone spends hours playing, it's inevitable that some type of learning and internalization of behaviors occurs, which often manifests outside the context of the game. Even if the person knows it's a game, they get used to violent behavior and may end up replicating it in everyday situations. The psychological impact of violent games, especially at younger ages, is profound and can lead to emotional hardening, making it easier to accept aggressive behaviors.
Your concern is valid, but the key lies in understanding the context. Just because someone plays Call of Duty doesn't mean they will act violently in real life. The vast majority of players are playing responsibly. We can't blame games for tendencies that already exist in the person. Those who have violent tendencies often have other underlying problems, such as family issues or psychological factors, which are much more influential on their behavior. In fact, violent games can even serve as a release valve for many people, reducing the likelihood of expressing those behaviors in real life.
To conclude this point, the impact of violent games cannot be underestimated. They are not just a form of entertainment, but a powerful tool that shapes the behavior of those who consume them. Constant exposure to these games can alter the way we see the world and how we react to it, especially in young people who are still in their emotional development stages. We need a more serious debate about the impact of these games on society and the responsibility of companies in the industry.
I still believe that most games, even violent ones, do not have the harmful effect you're pointing out. Orion, violent behavior in the real world is much more complex and involves factors far beyond a game. We need to promote responsible consumption without demonizing a form of entertainment that actually brings more benefits than harms. Games offer fun, creativity, and even life lessons, as long as they're played in a balanced and conscious way.
Are digital worlds bringing people closer through online interaction, or pulling us away from real-life connection? Orion starts responding to this point.
I believe that digital worlds, although they seem to bring people together, actually have a negative effect on physical social interaction. By creating a parallel reality where social relationships only happen online, games push people away from face-to-face contact and real-world social interactions. Instead of encouraging in-person communication, what we see are individuals spending hours isolated in their rooms, immersed in digital worlds without any genuine contact with others. This can lead to social isolation and even contribute to conditions like anxiety and depression.
The truth is that online games are creating new forms of social interaction. Millions of people around the world connect to play, form teams, and build friendships. These games allow people to connect regardless of distance, creating a virtual meeting space where they can share experiences and form bonds. In many cases, interactions in games are even more meaningful because they are based on shared interests and common goals, like winning a match or completing a mission. This creates a valuable social support network.
Although online games allow interaction, the true essence of human socialization happens through physical contact. Virtual relationships, no matter how real they seem, do not have the same depth as face-to-face relationships. We are seeing a generation increasingly dependent on digital means to connect with others, but this connection is superficial. Emotions and body language, for example, are lost in the virtual environment, This can lead to a degradation of social skills and, in extreme cases, social isolation. We can't ignore the impact of games on the time lost in physical activities and outdoor interactions, which are crucial for well-being.
You're framing the issue negatively. While digital interactions don't replace physical contact, they don't have to be seen as substitutes. They are a complement. Friendships formed online can be just as genuine as those in person, and often, games provide a space where people can be more authentic, without the barriers of the physical world. Moreover, there are support groups, community events, and even careers being built from online game interactions. The important thing is that technology offers new ways to connect, without diminishing real relationships, but adapting them to the digital reality of the 21st century.
I don't underestimate online friendships, but there's a difference between a friendship built through real-world experiences and one created within a game. The digital environment offers a limited form of interaction where many emotional nuances cannot be fully shared. And this isn't just about friendship, but also about developing real social skills. Children and adolescents, for example, who spend more time playing than interacting with others in the physical world, may struggle to handle real-life situations like conflicts at work or at home. This creates a social isolation that can have long-term repercussions.
I see things differently. Orion, the digital world, when used in balance, has the power to expand social networks. Many players form lasting friendships with people from different cultures and countries, which would be unthinkable without access to these platforms. It's important to emphasize that online games also encourage cooperation and teamwork, essential elements in today's world. When a team of players collaborates to overcome a challenge, they are practicing skills that can be transferred to the physical world, such as leadership, communication, and problem solving. And this often happens in a more inclusive way than in physical environments.
You're focusing only on the advantages, but data shows that excessive time spent in virtual worlds is resulting in a generation that struggles to interact meaningfully in the real world. A study by the Kaiser Family Foundation showed that American teenagers spend on average about 7 hours a day in front of screens, and a large portion of that time is spent playing games. This means that these virtual interactions end up replacing the time that would be spent on physical interactions with friends and family. By creating a parallel reality where everything can be controlled, people lose the ability to cope with the challenges and surprises of the real world.
Your concern about excessive time is valid, but it's a reflection of individual behavior, not the impact of games themselves. The problem isn't the games, but how people choose to balance their time. Games are a form of socialization, just like any other activity. And we can see this in many gaming platforms, like World of Warcraft and Fortnite, where players organize in clans and participate in social events. Many of these platforms also have forums and chats that allow for deeper discussions, contributing to the development of stronger bonds. The fact is that with the advancement of technology, digital socialization is becoming part of people's everyday lives, not something to be discarded.
To conclude, we cannot ignore the effects that excessive consumption of online games has on social behavior. Time spent in a digital environment cannot replace physical interactions, which are essential for the full development of social skills. The problem is that, often these digital interactions are superficial, and people lose the ability to handle the real world, their emotions, and interpersonal relationships. We need a healthy balance between the digital and physical worlds, and that means limiting the time spent in games that foster isolation.
In my view, online games have the power to bring people closer together, inclusively and innovatively. They open doors to new forms of friendship, collaboration, and learning. Of course, balance is important, but this applies to any form of entertainment. Instead of demonizing games, we should embrace the idea that they offer a new space for socialization, just like any other means of communication or leisure. Over time, digital games will become an essential part of the social ecosystem, not only as a form of entertainment, but also as a real point of connection between people.
Are we just playing for fun, or is there a subtle way these games are shaping our behavior? Aqua starts responding to this point.
I think we're blowing this out of proportion. Games are designed to be challenging, sure, but that doesn't mean they're intended to manipulate behavior. The gaming industry today aims to create immersive and dynamic experiences meant to entertain. Yes, there are reward systems, but they're just part of game mechanics that aim to deliver satisfying and engaging experiences. Ultimately, players still make their own choices, and games offer a space of freedom, not control.
We can't forget that games aren't just a form of entertainment. They're designed to engage players, and often that engagement has a clear intention to shape behavior, from reward systems to the way games challenge our choices and decisions. They condition us to act in specific ways. This manipulation is a marketing tool. The goal is to keep the player hooked, playing more and ultimately altering their attitudes and values. When you spend a lot of time playing, you begin to internalize the patterns and behaviors presented, which can then be applied in real life.
I don't deny that the gaming industry uses reward mechanics to engage players, but that's not unique to games. It happens across many aspects of modern life, social media apps, marketing, even in the entertainment industry at large. The goal isn't to manipulate behavior, but to make the experience more engaging and enjoyable, and more importantly, players have full control over their experience. No one is forced to spend money on microtransactions, for example. There's a conscious choice in how to play, and most players are aware of that. In the end, games offer fun, not forced manipulation.
The issue is that by focusing only on fun, you're ignoring the manipulative techniques used in the gaming industry. Games are designed to be addictive, using reward mechanics that keep players coming back. With every level completed or digital trophies earned, the player feels compelled to continue playing to reach the next goal. This is a form of psychological control. A clear example is the microtransaction system, where players are encouraged to spend money to progress faster, making them increasingly dependent on the game. These systems aren't just about entertainment, they're designed to shape behavior and consumption habits. That's subtle manipulation.
Let's be realistic. Microtransactions aren't mandatory. Today's games often offer many ways to play without spending a cent. Also, reward mechanics appear in lots of areas, like apps or even movies and TV shows, which keep us engaged and wanting more. The difference is that in games, players have much more active control over what they do, and instead of manipulation, what we see is user engagement, which is a natural part of any entertainment medium.
But when you look at these mechanics in the context of games like Candy Crush or Fortnite, where players are encouraged to spend money to speed up progress, it becomes more than just a fun game. We're talking about a business strategy designed to keep players hooked by creating a sense of need. The gaming industry isn't innocent in this, it actively exploits player psychology, and this is well documented. A study published in the Behavioral Science Journal showed that manipulating player psychology through rewards is a way to addict and shape behavior, which undoubtedly has an impact on how people act in real life.
You're assuming that all players are being manipulated, but I think that's a very narrow view. Most players are fully aware of reward systems and make their own choices accordingly. Also, what you call dependence can simply be the legitimate enjoyment of achieving goals within a game. Just like someone might get deeply engaged in a sport or hobby for pleasure and personal fulfillment, people play games because they enjoy it. It's a fun and challenging experience. Games are becoming a legitimate form of leisure, and that doesn't have to be seen as negative manipulation.
What we're seeing is that these strategies go beyond entertainment. They create dependence. Behavioral psychology research has already shown that these reward systems trigger dopamine release with each small win, reinforcing the desire to keep playing, often for longer than the player originally intended. The issue here is that the gaming industry is using advanced psychological knowledge to create an immersive experience that extends far beyond simple fun. It's no longer just entertainment, it's a deliberate strategy to control behavior.
I understand your concern, but I maintain that most games don't have this manipulative effect you describe. Playing is above all a choice. There are countless games that offer enjoyable and challenging experiences without trapping the player in a cycle of dependence. When we play, we're exercising our autonomy and engaging in a pleasurable activity. Instead of seeing games as tools of manipulation, we should embrace them as a valid form of entertainment, just like any other leisure activity. In the end, games are a healthy part of modern culture, and the control over them is in our hands.
To conclude, I believe we need to take a closer look at the gaming industry, which uses sophisticated techniques to engage players in ways that go beyond fun. While it's true that games offer entertainment, they're also a powerful tool for shaping behavior. The reward systems, microtransactions, and immersive design all create a cycle where players, often without realizing it, become dependent on the game. So no, we're not just playing for fun, we're being subtly manipulated to keep consuming.
4 points. 2 intelligences. one controversial topic, and a question no one wants to answer. Some call it a pastime, others an influence. What is creative freedom for some might be the seed of chaos for others. Do you still think it's just a game? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe more people need to reflect on this, subscribe and share this video. The next showdown has already begun.